Uh,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, like, that's true, Jake. I didn't think of it that way.
No, but Jake,
It's
let me hear
very.
your thoughts on the thing that we were talking about before, actually. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Jake, you're an interesting guy.
All
The points you're making.
right, this is stupid.
Very.
This is stupid. We're just gonna get on with the show.
All
Hello,
right.
everyone, and welcome to the ninth episode of the Fantasy and Friends show. My name is Daniel, and with me here is Alok.
What's up?
And unfortunately, Jake could not be here, and we really struggled to replace him. But it's tough, you know. Couldn't get anyone. We went through dozens of pages in our contact book, but we couldn't find anyone.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people like wanted to be on the
No, that's
show,
not
but
true.
there's prior commitments and all.
No, I don't think
It
so.
was a really last minute thing, I think. I think if we had like even just an hour more of time, we would have had like a laundry list of people that would have wanted to
No,
be
I
on the
think it was
show.
just lack of interest. I think we were just ineffective, and let's talk about ineffective pitchers here. So
Oh no.
I've got one here that we're gonna get to later that I know you're not gonna like to talk about, but we're gonna start
Oh.
with Justin Verlander, who has a 4.96 ERA right now, and I think it's July now, right? So we have to stop saying it's too early in the year. He's gonna turn it around.
It's July
Yeah,
6th, yeah.
what's going on?
Well, um, not a lot of good things. It seems like the two numbers that jump out to me most are his walk rate, it's 4.32. That's obviously high, and that's a career high for him. And his hard hit rate is about 10% higher, I think. Let me double check. Where'd that number go? Yeah, it's about 10% higher than last year, and it's also at a career high. So for a pitcher like Verlander, who's 34 years old, you would think that his velocity would be down, but it's actually up. So you're like, what? Um,
And let's keep in mind, this is not like a guy that's never had a bad season. He's actually, it seems like every 5 years he posts an ERA above 450. You know, it's like 2008 he has a 4.84 ERA in 200 innings. Keep in mind, and then
mhm.
2014 a 4.54 ERA. So this seems like every like 5 years he just for some reason
Just
loses it.
forgets how to
Yeah, he
pitch.
forgets how to
Yeah,
pitch, and then he's always great the next year.
that's
So
that's true.
I think in long term, maybe in like a keeper league, I would have a little more faith in him. But this year, he kind of has that track record of he's just gonna keep doing it. I don't see this getting so much better. I mean, he keeps getting shelled every game.
Yeah, though the difference I guess the difference between his 2008 and 2014 campaigns are those two numbers like his ERA and like his run saving numbers have been high those years, but even in 2014 he still had um, a walk rate of under 3 and a hard hit rate of 27%. It seems like this year those two numbers are out of the ordinary even for those two bad
And
campaigns.
it's a different game even from 3 years ago. I mean, you have guys who are hitting the ball at like 50% hard contact rates now that you didn't see in
Yeah,
2014. We're not gonna talk about
yeah.
him, but who, by the way, I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, well, we're not gonna talk about Aaron Judge. Okay, he's
The
he has
walking.
like a 40 home run to fly ball ratio, which is ridiculous. Like even Barry Bonds had like
Yeah,
a career 30 home run to fly ball ratio. So unless there's
yeah,
something going on, there's some regression there. Even though and I say this, and he's probably already hit three more home runs.
yeah. I don't think anyone's gonna think that he's gonna hit 60 home runs this year.
He has like a
That's
430 BABIP, which again is like better
Yeah,
than like steroided Barry Bonds.
well, maybe this is well conspiracy theory. This is steroided Aaron Judge.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I don't want to say he's
No, I don't.
taking
I mean, I
extra.
don't
He's
think
getting extra
so.
help on his homework, but he's
Uh,
it's only been
Seems
like
like a
three
nice
guys that
kid.
have had a BABIP over 400 the past like since like 1960, and even they had like a 405 BABIP. He has a 433. Anyway, let's
Yeah.
go to Michael Pineda,
Oh no.
who looked pretty good through the first 2 months of the season, and now, well, I think he's actually getting pretty predictable now because it's every other start.
Yeah, it's.
So you can kind of know when to start him because he had 5 runs against Toronto yesterday, so now he should be good to go on his next one, right?
Yeah, I mean, clearly that makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess he's gone back to inconsistent Michael Pineda that we knew and hated last year. I mean, throughout the first few months of the season, he had a pretty consistent. I mean, his control was pretty consistent for the first few months of the season. I mean, his first pitch strike rate was always at least, you know, 60, which is like fine, I guess. But then now it's like going back and forth between like 70% and then 50%. And it's like you have to make up your mind sometime. Either be bad or be good. Make my life easier, please.
So the problem that I'm seeing also is his strikeouts are going down each month.
Yeah, that's yeah,
So
it seems like he's been on a downward trend each month. It's not just June that he
yeah, in April he
blew
had
up.
11.6 strikeouts per nine. May was 8.4, which is still good, which is still usable. And then June was 6.7.
Yeah, and then his ERA has also been climbing a little bit since then. I mean, I guess,
Well, it didn't really blow up until June,
uh, yeah,
but
it's fair.
that is concerning.
But
So it looks like he's getting I mean,
yeah,
he had a 336 BABIP in June, which is a little high, and it looks like actually his May BABIP was lucky, so he probably got away with a lot of stuff in May. So is this
yeah,
a
I mean,
guy maybe you're
225.
buying low on or something? Do you think he's going to turn it around next week?
um, well, if we're looking at next week, he's we don't know yet.
Well, you can guess who he's going to
Um,
start against. So
eh,
they're going to play. So next week they play right after the All Star break. They play. They're at Boston and then at the Twins. So he'll play one of those,
okay.
and then at
I
the
mean,
Mariners.
I think he'd do fine. Though then again, he also gave up 5 runs to the Angels once. So I mean, I think my first instinct is to say I want to see a few more starts, but it's already been going on for all of June.
Well, it's every other
Um,
start.
yeah, I mean that's the
It's like he
trend.
and Urban Santana are doing the same thing right now. It's every other start is a bad start.
I mean that there might be some advanced sabermetrics about every other start that I don't know about that could predict this. I don't know,
All
but
right, you're just rambling now. Ian Kennedy,
yeah.
who's had an ERA under 4 2 of the last 3 years, who's largely been a very fairly consistent pitcher throughout his career. Was off to a really rocky start to begin the season, but he looks like, over the past 4 starts, it looks like he's back to mediocre, fantasy useful Ian Kennedy.
Fantasy useful.
Yeah, he's not gonna win you a championship. He's not gonna do too much, but he can give you solid innings and give you a mid to high threes ERA with some strikeouts.
I
Are you
mean,
buying in on?
I I don't know. I mean, even over his last few starts, he's had some ones like against Boston, he gave up 2 earned runs and only like 4 innings, and he walked 3 guys. and then 2 starts before that against the Padres, he gave up 4 runs in 6, which isn't great. I mean, that's a game score of 48. I don't know if I'll buy in. I think he's doing a little better. Obviously, I mean, his June ERA was 4, and then in May it was like, you know, 11. So
Are
I
you
think
are you going to
he's.
use him against the
I don't
Dodgers on
think
Saturday?
I. I don't think I'll pick him up in general. I mean,
All right, you hate Ian
it
Kennedy.
is. I
That's
don't
fine.
hate
That's
Ian
fine.
Kin.
No, it's
I
fine if you
mean,
hate him.
you know,
I don't care.
do you hate him?
No, I think he's fine. Like I said, I think he's a fantasy useful starting pitcher.
I think he's doing better. Sure, yeah. Um, I don't know if I'll pick him up just yet.
Okay, Milwaukee shortstop who's been uh, playing a lot now with VR out. It looks like he's going to continue playing. Orlando Arcia, mainly known for his defensive abilities, but kind of copying Andrelton Simmons this year, has decided to start hitting. That's he had a string of 3 straight multi-hit games in a row with home runs. He's scoring runs. He could steal a few bases, though actually he could probably be a little better on the base paths. But this is a guy who could be a useful starting shortstop going forward. Do you like him?
I think I do. I mean, I remember I was looking at shortstops in free agency to replace Brandon Crawford,
Yeah,
and
that's a good
and
idea.
I think, and it seemed like Arcia was a pretty good candidate. Um, I mean, he has had some success hitting in the minors. I mean, 2015, he had like a 307 average, 453 slugging. It's not terrible. Um, in fact, that's like pretty comparable to what he's doing right now. So,
All right, so I'll give you some
I
guys to compare him. Okay,
okay.
would you pick Orlando Arcia or Addison Russell?
Uh, Probably Arcia. Let me pull up. I mean, Russell's hitting like what 230 or something.
Yeah, he's not doing too well.
Yeah. So I mean, I can pull up his numbers, but I'm pretty sure I looked at him at least a little bit when I was looking for shortstops, and I think I would pick Arcia.
Okay. Obviously, if you need power, Addison Russell's a better candidate.
Right.
Arcia's not going to hit 20 home runs, even though he has one more home run than Addison Russell this year, which is interesting. Okay, so Arcia or Trevor Story?
Well, Trevor Story's also like tanking this year, isn't he?
Yeah, I'll give you options. This is what's available on the waiver wire. You know, this is
I mean, let me pull up Story's numbers as well. Uh, yeah. I think I would go with Arcia. I mean, Story also has the strikeout downside of like 34%.
all
I
right.
think, and then his hard hit rate's also like 15% down.
Well, let's say you need a middle infielder. Maybe you would want Whit Merrifield.
Witty
Do
Merrifield.
you want him?
Second. Do I want him? Well, I have Jose Altuve at second.
Yeah, but he could also play outfield. You can move him around. He's hitting.
Does he have Does he have eligibility for outfield?
Yeah, he's second base and outfield
Oh, I didn't
in
know
standard
that.
ESPN leagues.
Okay. Well,
Do you like Whit Merrifield for the rest of the season?
um, yeah. I mean, I think he's doing well this year. I don't think it'd be. I mean, he's hitting 286 now. That's fine, and he hit in 2016 as well, in about slightly more games. So That's obvious. That's not like out of the ordinary for him.
And the point.
He's hitting a lot.
Yeah, go ahead.
What was that?
Go ahead.
I mean, he's hitting a lot more. What's it called?
Extra base
Fly
hits.
balls. Fly ball.
Yeah.
And yeah, extra base. It's all that. I guess he's changed his approach at the plate probably. So yeah, I mean, in general, I think he's playing well this year.
The important thing here is also he's leading off now, so he's been scoring a run every game now, as you know, somehow the Kansas City Royals are winning games. He's sitting in front of, you know, Hosmer, Perez, so
Yes,
that should do well for him.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Would you start? So let's say you have struggling outfielder
God.
Carlos Gonzalez on your team, and you have Whit Merrifield.
Oh, good. That's not. Oh, good. I don't have cargo.
Which one do you start? You have one spot. You gotta start.
Carlos Gonzalez.
Carlos Gonzalez or red hot Whit Merrifield. Just for like today, say, or you know,
Just
this
for
week.
today?
I mean, not for like don't you don't have to lock him in for the rest of the season, but like for the immediate future.
That's an interesting call because Cargo obviously has the track record of this season's end. I'm going to guess.
Guess.
Whit. I'm gonna guess my opinion at Whit Merrifield for now. I mean, Cargo does have the track record, but I guess in the short term, Whit Merrifield seems like the better option. Cargo is just, I mean, he's hitting more ground balls. His hard hits rate's down. His BABIP is he's probably getting unlucky too, but I do think that there's some stuff that Cargo might be fixing at the moment. I don't know.
All right, let's talk about a guy who may not be in the majors when we next do this show.
Yeah.
Clint Frazier, who had a really nice debut game and has kind of not really done a lot else. His hit list in every other game after that.
Well, I mean, how many games has he?
He's played like 4 games.
4.
Yeah,
4.
He's played.
For some reason, Fangraphs is
like a day behind. Yeah.
Well, no, it's an inconsistency. Like I know Fangraphs is a day behind, but like his season stats say that he's only played 2 games. But if you look at his game log, he's played 4.
Well, because I think like some of it is a day behind. So he sat out.
It's just like an inconsistency. Yeah.
He sat out last night, and it looks like he's going back to AAA. But assuming he stays in the lineup for like this weekend, are you going to pick him up and use him? Against Milwaukee.
I mean, against Milwaukee.
Yeah, that's who they're playing this weekend.
Well, I mean, one thing. Okay. So he's had success in the minors, of course, and he's had a bad stretch of games, but against who exactly? Because I mean, he hasn't been striking out a lot in those 3 games. I mean, he's only struck out in one of those and twice. So I think I would, if we're only talking about the Milwaukee series, depending on who he played against, like the pitchers he played against the past 3 days, I think I would take him. But I don't know about any longer term considering like I think playing time for Frazier might be of concern considering the Yankees already have 3 outfielders. So if we're only talking like short term, sure, but any longer term, then I have doubts if I'm gonna pick him up.
Okay. This catcher is available in over 70% of ESPN leagues, was a top 5 catcher last year, even with the injury. Is currently hitting 174. He's not really playing every day, but he has 2 home runs. What are your thoughts on Wilson Ramos going forward?
I mean, what he tore his ACL, right?
Yeah, but
like,
he looks fine.
That's tough. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just confirming. Yeah. I mean, a lot of his like um, numbers that I guess would change if his injury really affected him seem to be the same. Like his heart rates.
All right, well, he's played in like 5 games, so it's hard to look at his
fine,
fastball.
fair, but
And you can assume he's still rusty.
and I guess it's also worth noting that now he's in a completely different league, so there's probably some adjusting that he would have to do.
Well, he's played for the Twins before. Well, in their minor league system.
Right, like, and it hasn't been since 2010. So, I mean, obviously, I would think I would want to see more than 2 games.
No, he's played in like 5 games.
Or 6 games.
Yeah,
6 games, rather. I was thinking Clint Frazier. But
he's played in 4 games. What are you talking about?
I'm talking of... Okay, that's what I was saying before. Like, Fangraphs has an inconsistency on their site. Like,
so looking at his 6-game sample size here, it looks like his batted ball profile is pretty much what it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, his heart rate's the same. His soft and medium are also pretty similar. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the injury has hurt him long term. Yeah, I think down the road he might turn into a decent catcher again.
Well, would you pick him up over Tyler Flowers?
Let me look up his numbers.
Tyler Flowers is hitting over 300 in a rock solid mediocre Atlanta Braves lineup. Well, they're mediocre. They're not as bad as people think they are.
Rock solid.
Freeman back, Matt Adams hitting.
No, I'm saying the oxymoron. Rock solid, mediocre.
Yeah. Oh, they're a solid mediocre lineup. They're nothing. They're solid in that they're consistent. They're not better. They're not worse. I mean, there's something in that lineup. You have Marquez who's hitting everything, but Tyler Flowers who's hitting over 300, who probably should have been an all-star, as opposed to who'd they send? I don't remember.
The NL.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they sent Buster Posey.
No, these are the Braves. The Braves.
I don't
know.
Some guy.
I'll look it up.
Some dude.
So, which one would you prefer, Tyler Flowers or Wilson Ramos?
I don't know. That's a hard thing to pick. I don't know if Flowers is a true 319 hitter. Considering, I mean, last year his BABIP between last year and this year, I mean, they're like roughly the same. His BABIP this year is higher, but his hard hit rate is down from last year. So I'm assuming he has a bit of luck so far.
Yeah, but he's still. I don't think he could hit 320, but he could hit that he could hit 270 again.
He could hit 270 again. Yeah,
he's not striking out as much.
Yeah, that is true.
His strikeouts are down 10 or 8%.
10%. Rounding.
BABIP isn't that much higher. It's not crazy higher.
It's not crazy higher, but his hard hit rate's down, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, but that 43.8% was a bit ridiculous last year, too.
Right. No, I'm saying that like his BABIP with that hard hit percentage last year is lower than it is now.
Yeah, but he's also hitting more line drives, so I'll give him the pass on that one.
I guess. Yeah, that's true.
And his swinging strike rate is down. That goes with the strikeout rate being down. So it looks like he's made some
yeah,
adjustments.
yeah. I think I might pick Flowers just because he's the safer option right now. Um, but I would not be surprised if Ramos um, picked it up. Maybe not the last year's numbers, but like pretty decent. Flowers like maybe slightly better numbers.
All right, so let's look at the matchups for next week. So I have three guys listed here, and we'll rank them, and then we'll look at last week's matchups. And
Oh,
keep in mind, we're not since Jake's on here, we're not doing trivia today.
are you sure? Are you sure we can't find some interesting baseball
Yeah,
fact in the
we're not just
next
gonna do it
two
on the fly.
minutes?
And it's it's not it's kind of it's not as interesting without Jake here. So we're just gonna do trivia. We're gonna
Are
say
you
trivia for next week.
are you saying we're boring people?
Well, I'm saying you're boring. Okay, so we have Jarrell
Whoa,
Cotton.
whoa there,
Jarrell Cotton at
whoa there,
Jarrell Cotton at Seattle.
whoa there.
Luis Perdomo at Philadelphia, and Tyson
It's
Ross
prom.
against the Angels. What's how would you rank these guys? These matchups?
Well, let's see. I think. Uh, I think Perdomo is the best pitcher
Good, that's the right answer.
out of all of these guys. Oh, I mean Tyson
I like
Ross.
Tyson Ross. I think they're all kind of like in the same area where they're high upside, but lots of risk, right? All these guys
Well,
could be well, maybe not stars, but all these guys could be like
decent.
very, very usable, mediocre Ian Kennedy type starting pitcher.
I mean, sure. But I think I would put Perdomo as my number one. I think he's the best pitcher out of these three, and then the Phillies are obviously the Phillies. Like against righties, what are they? The Phillies are numbers.
I'll pull that up, but I don't really trust you to pull that up.
Second to last in slugging. So I think I would put Perdomo as my number one. And then between Cotton
Yeah,
and
so Joe
Ross.
Cotton, who was just called up recently, I can't trust him. In Seattle's a decent lineup against right-handers.
Yeah, I mean
It's
if you
just
have Cano and
and Kyle Seager and Cruz and
Kyle
they're all
True.
gonna hit. So I think I have to go Ross, even though he's also been inconsistent since returning from his like 10 season long injury. But yeah, that's just
Yeah, I mean Ross has been inconsistent, but I guess he's at least done well against Cleveland and Seattle.
Tyson Ross you could
So
get 2 seasons ago was a really good pitcher.
yeah,
2 seasons ago, 3 seasons, three, yeah, well, yeah, 2 years ago. So
yeah,
3 years ago he had a
yeah.
2.81 ERA with a strikeout per inning, literally a strikeout per inning, and the next year he was 326 with more than a strikeout per inning. Now he's gonna walk guys, and that's kind of always been his flaw. But he had a run with the Padres where he was a pretty good, very useful starting pitcher, and then obviously got injured last year and is now with Texas.
Tejas.
And keep in mind, so I'm pulling up, so the Phillies are second to last in weighted on base average against right-handed pitching, second to last to only the San Francisco Giants.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I guess Perdomo Ross Cotton seems reasonable.
All right. And then the Mariners are 13th in weighted on base, and they're above average. They're at a 105 weighted runs created plus, which is above average. And the Angels have been doing well pretty lately though, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And Mike Trout, who's just did his rehab, who's just started his rehab assignment last night, he'll be back next week, I think. No,
Possibly.
yeah. All right, so
Maybe.
last week, it's a good thing Jake didn't come on because he got that Chaucine Butler thing wrong. Butler got blown up for 5 runs against the Reds, as I kind of predicted. Just saying. We know Jake's not going to listen to this show, so we'll just keep rubbing it in his face. Eddie Butler at Cincinnati. I mean, all kidding aside, I was worried about that matchup. And Chaucine, who leads the majors in home ERA this year. Leads the majors.
Leads as in...
with like minimum of 50 innings pitched.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Leads all starters in home ERA.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do?
So he is the reverse Tyler Chatwood. You use him at home, I guess. Same with like Matt Moore, though Matt Moore's been a little inconsistent. Yolis Chaucine, who threw 5 shutout innings against the Dodgers. Yeah, he has a 1.68 ERA at home now.
It's like a Trevor Cahill.
We're not going to talk about him, but yeah, look at the BABIP difference. His BABIP at home is 2.11, away is 4.12.
Oh wow!
So maybe he's getting a little lucky, but it probably should be somewhere in between. But still, that's 9 starts now at home that he has that we have as a sample size. So he maybe had a better start. I mean, arguably than Trevor Williams, who went 6 innings, and I was paying attention to that game, and basically, he throws 6 shutout innings. He starts the 7th inning. He walks a guy. He gives up a hit, and they take him out. And then Tony Watson comes in and basically holds the batter's hand and lets them run home. I mean, he gave up those 2 runs like fairly quickly, and I was like, oh really? So he really should have had 6 shutout innings with the win. Keep in mind, because they were up 3-1, I think at that time, or 2-0, whatever it was. So he was in line for the win with 6 scoreless innings, and then but still he gave 6 innings and 2 runs is nothing to fret about. He looks great. Looks like he's settled down. So, and we all picked Williams first, and then Alok just copied me and picked Chaucine second.
I did not just copy.
I think you did.
No, I mean the Reds hit well, and Chaucine's fine.
I'm not a big Eddie Butler fan, anyways. That's fine. All right, let's. If that's all we have, then maybe you want to talk about something you've read.
Sure. So guys, we're gonna talk about Moore's Law today. So, for those of you who don't know, Moore's Law was essentially this prediction in the 1980s.
Oh, hold on. Breaking news.
Breaking news?
There was a trade accepted in our league.
Really?
I don't know how. So, Michael Fulmer got traded by a team that seemed to not be active.
What the? Wait, what the?
For Ian Desmond, Bud Norris, and Michael Waka.
Huh.
Interesting.
Ian Desmond DL.
Ian Desmond
Bud Norris.
Yeah. Bud Norris, who's arguably a top 10 relief pitcher this year.
And Michael Waka.
Michael Waka is inconsistent but very useful. All right, sorry, go ahead. I just saw that now.
Yeah, that breaking news. This just in. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Moore's Law was essentially this prediction in the 1980s that said that computers would get twice as fast about every year. And the reason this prediction was valid for really up until 2005, so about 30 years, was because we were able to make transistors on processors smaller and smaller for 30 years. So since the 1980s, computers did get twice as fast every year. But in 2005, we hit what was known as the power wall, which meant that um, post 2005 computers aren't really getting any faster. And if you look in the markets, for instance, processors are generally between like 2.5 and 3 gigahertz, for instance. And the reason is we can make transistors smaller like we did before, but now it's taking a lot more power. So it's infeasible, basically. So now because of that, researchers are looking to different ways to compute, essentially. So like right now we have silicon-based processors, and in the future we're looking towards computing such as DNA computing or approximate computing or quantum computing even. I'm planning on discussing parallel computing, which is the phase we're at right now, proximate computing, DNA computing, and quantum computing. So once we hit the power wall in 2005, processors were obviously not getting any faster. So the switch that companies like Intel and AMD went to first was parallel computing, which is essentially sticking multiple processors in a computer, in a sense. So that way you can run things not faster, but simultaneously. So if you've heard of things like a two-core, like a dual-core or a quad-core processor, that just basically means that there are 2 or 4 processors in your computer. You could think of it that way at least. And I mean, that's nice. Obviously, you can now run like 2 or 4 things at the same time, but it is still a temporary solution. So, and this isn't just my opinion, there are researchers at UC Berkeley with some very big names in the field like James Demel, David Patterson, Catherine Yellick. They were all saying that parallel computing is just a temporary solution right now because sure we can run 2 or 4 things, sometimes 8 things at the same time, but a lot of times we don't have that many things to run at the same time. So there's no use to putting like 2 or 4 cores on your system if you're not able to use all of them. And then on top of that, there are problems that you can't really parallelize. Like there are some problems that if you throw more and more cores at it, you're not going to solve it any faster because you have to solve one step before you solve the next. So you can't do those 2 steps at the same time. So there's no use to having multiple cores. And then on top of that, parallel computing is also power intensive. Not as much as making transistors smaller, but it is still power intensive and it is still a temporary solution. So there's actually a group at Georgia Tech called Crunch, which is investigating new ways to compute. So some of the ways they've been discussing are things like approximate computing, DNA computing, brain-inspired computing, quantum computing. There's all sorts of different unconventional, unorthodox ways that we can build a computer. And there's a team of researchers all over the computing stack, from computer architecture to theory, who are working on determining which way is best and how to make that way practical. So one of the I guess straightforward solutions is known as approximate computing, which is kind of what it sounds like, in the sense that computers right now are very, very precise. Like you can compute things to a high degree of precision, or like several significant figures is what I mean. But oftentimes that's not necessary. Like that takes a lot of power, unnecessary power, and a lot of unnecessary compute time. So approximate computing is how can we build a processor, build gates like logic gates and algorithms that can solve a problem not exactly but just give an estimate. So approximation in general has been around for a while in the theoretical community. So approximation algorithms uh, have existed for a while, but no one's been looking at approximate computer architecture up until recently, and it's a pretty interesting field. Um, how can we, uh, design a processor that's not exact but approximate, but takes much less power and much less compute time is an interesting problem that a lot of people are working on. At Georgia Tech, for instance, Hadi, I forget his last name, is someone who does work in approximate computing, for instance, if you want to look into his work. So that's approximate computing. And then there's also DNA computing, which is an interesting approach since no one, or at least most people, don't think that we can compute with, enzymes and stuff. DNA computing is essentially, it's also relatively what it sounds like. It's building a computer with DNA strands, enzymes, and all sorts of bio stuff. So the thing about DNA computing, so one question that a lot of people might come to mind, or a lot of people might have, is how does that exactly does this work? Like, how can you, store things on a computer or compute? So to compute on a DNA computer, researchers in 2013 actually invented a transcriptor, which is basically a transistor-like device, but instead of having silicon, it has DNA and RNA strands. And since we have this transistor-like device that we can build using DNA and RNA, that means that all sorts of logic gates like AND gates, XOR gates, OR gates, they can all be made with DNA and RNA. And since we can make those logic gates with DNA, we can make a processor with DNA. So, so in terms of capabilities, DNA computing isn't actually that much faster in terms of single core performance against a silicon chip. But remember what I said before, where a silicon chip, a silicon processor, you can give it multiple cores, but it'll still take like a fair amount of power. But with DNA computing, with a DNA processor, we could have like millions of cores and not take as much time, or as much power rather. So for problems that are very parallelizable, DNA computing seems to be a pretty promising field. But obviously, or maybe not so obviously, DNA computing is still nascent. Like people were only able to solve some very relatively like trivial problems for a silicon computer on a DNA computer in like 2002 or something. So it's still nascent, and keep in mind the transcriptor was only invented in 2013. So it's obviously still a nascent field, but for problems that are very parallelizable, like matrix multiplication, for instance, this could be a very, very promising field. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about quantum computing, which is very buzzwordy in the field. And if you thought DNA computing was nascent, quantum computing is even more nascent. So the way quantum computing sort of works is on a silicon-based system, you might know that every single form of data on your computer, every single file or your browser, your homework, everything is stored in bits, which are either 0 or 1. So every single string of letters in your Word file is ultimately a string of ones and zeros to your computer. Now, the thing about a quantum computer is instead of having just ones and zeros, a quantum computer also has what's known as a qubit, which is essentially a superposition of 0 and 1 in this quantum state. And that allows quantum computers, rather, to store more information and compute a lot faster than a silicon computer. Like, for instance, some of you may know that prime factorization on a silicon computer is very, very hard. And in fact, the reason it's hard is the reason that that cryptography really works. And by hard, I mean it's hard to do efficiently. But on a quantum computer, using an algorithm known as Shor's algorithm, this is actually pretty fast. So building a quantum computer might lead to security concerns because a lot of public key cryptography relies on integer factorization being a very slow process. But on a quantum computer, it's really efficient. But again, quantum computing is also in a very nascent state. Most of the work in quantum computation is very theoretical at the moment. One of the biggest researchers is Scott Aronson, who mostly does work in quantum complexity theory, which is essentially just a field of research that talks about what can quantum computers not do. So a lot of quantum computing research is still theoretical, and in fact, for instance, I mentioned that integer factorization is fast on a quantum computer, but we've only been able to factor the number 15 so far on an actual quantum computer. So there's still ways to go on a lot of these new ways to compute, but they're very interesting, unorthodox forms of computation that we might see in the future, given the state of silicon processors and given the state of Moore's law. So, hope you enjoyed that interesting
All right, we're running long here, so
dialogue.
I'm assuming you've
49 minutes.
wrapped it up.
Yeah, I think just effectively done.
We'll be back next week with hopefully a lot of fun things.
A lot of fun.
Anything else you want to say?
Thank you, viewers.
All right, that's enough from you. We'll talk. We probably won't. I don't know. We won't have as much to talk about with baseball because of the All-Star break, but we will be here on Thursday, I assume, right?
I mean, I think so. Happy belated 4th of July to all the Americans.
All right, no one cares. All right, so that's it.
America cares.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.